house on Maplewood Lane was too damn quiet. Jake Carter, 19 and barely into his first semester at the local community college, sprawled on the couch, laptop balanced on his knees. His parents, Mark and Ellen, had left that morning for a 3-day business conference in Philly, leaving him in charge of the place, and his 16-year-old sister, Sophie. It wasn't the first time they'd trusted him to hold down the fort, but something about this weekend felt heavier. Like the air itself was holding its breath. Jake glanced at Sophie, curled up in the armchair across the living room, her phone glowing against her face. She was scrolling through some group chat, giggling at whatever her friends were posting. At 16, Sophie was all sharp edges and nervous energy, her dark hair pulled into a messy bun, her hazel eyes darting around the room every time the old house creaked. Jake couldn't blame her. Their place was a century old, with drafty windows and pipes that groaned like they were auditioning for a horror flick. "Yo, Soph," Jake said, closing his laptop. "You hungry?" "I'm thinking pizza." She looked up, chewing her lip. "Only if we get extra cheese. And no olives this time. They taste like sadness." Jake snorted. "Fine, princess. Extra cheese. No sadness." He grabbed his phone and ordered from their usual spot, the kind of place that knew their address by heart. It was Friday night, and for a moment everything felt normal. Just two siblings chilling, no parents, no rules. Well, except the unspoken one. Don't burn the house down. The pizza arrived steaming and gooey, and they devoured it while binge-watching some cheesy action movie on Netflix. Jake kept one eye on the screen, the other on Sophie, who seemed jumpier than usual. Every time the wind rattled the windows, she'd flinch, her fingers tightening around her soda can. "You good?" he asked during a quiet scene, the TV's glow casting shadows across her face. She shrugged, not meeting his eyes. "Yeah, just... this house is creepy at night, don't you think?" "It's old, Soph. Old houses talk. It's just the wind messing with the shutters." He tried to sound confident, but truth be told, the silence between the creaks was starting to get to him too. Lancaster wasn't exactly a hotbed of crime, but being alone in a big house made every noise feel like a threat. By 11 p.m., Sophie was yawning, her eyelids drooping. "I'm crashing," she announced, grabbing her phone and heading upstairs. Jake nodded, pretending to be engrossed in the movie, but his mind was elsewhere. He didn't like admitting it, but being in charge made him feel like he was walking a tightrope. One wrong step and everything could unravel. He locked the front door, checked the back, and even peeked out the kitchen window, half expecting to see something lurking in the yard. Nothing but moonlight and the neighbors' overgrown hedges. Shaking off the unease, he trudged to his room, the stairs creaking under his sneakers. Sleep came fast, his dreams a blurry mix of college assignments and pizza grease. Saturday morning hit like a freight train. Jake woke to the smell of burnt toast and Sophie cursing in the kitchen. "You trying to set off the smoke alarm?" he called, stumbling downstairs in his sweatpants. "Shut up," she shot back, scraping charcoal off a slice of bread. "I'm experimenting." "With arson?" He smirked, grabbing a cereal box from the pantry. They bickered like always, the tension from last night fading in the daylight. Sophie spent the afternoon texting her best friend, Mia, about some biology project, while Jake tinkered with a logo design for his portfolio. He was obsessed with graphic design, the way you could twist shapes and colors into something that hit people right in the gut. It was his ticket out of Lancaster, or so he hoped. By evening, the house felt alive again, the hum of normalcy drowning out the creaks. Jake set up his laptop in the living room, half working, half watching a local news channel drone on about a missing hiker in the county over. Sophie decided she was in a chef mood and announced she'd make spaghetti. Jake raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. If she wanted to play Gordon Ramsay, that was her funeral. The kitchen was a war zone of tomato sauce and boiling water. Jake could hear Sophie humming to herself, the clank of pots mixing with the faucet's steady drip. He was just getting into the zone with his design when a scream ripped through the house. Sharp, raw, like someone had stabbed her. "Sophie!" Jake's laptop hit the floor as he bolted to the kitchen, his heart slamming against his ribs. He found her pressed against the counter, her face pale as death, her trembling finger pointing at the window above the sink. There's someone out there," she whispered, her voice cracking. He was covered in blood." Jake's stomach lurched. "What? Who? Stay there." He rushed to the window, his sneakers skidding on the tile. The porch light cast a weak glow over the backyard, illuminating nothing but grass and shrubs. No one. Not a damn thing. He squinted into the darkness, his breath fogging the glass, but the yard was empty. "Soph, there's nobody out there," he said, turning back to her. She was shaking, her arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold her bones together. "I saw him, Jake," she insisted, tears welling up. "He was right there, staring at me, his shirt. It was soaked in blood like he'd been in a fight or worse." Jake's skin prickled. He wanted to believe she'd imagined it. Sophie's brain was always spinning ghost stories out of nothing. But the terror in her eyes was real. Okay, he said, forcing his voice to stay steady. "Maybe it was a trick of the light, shadows or something. Let's close the blinds, all right?" She nodded, but her gaze kept darting to the window. They yanked the blinds shut, the plastic slats clattering like bones. Jake's hands were clammy as he helped her finish the spaghetti, though neither of them had an appetite anymore. The sauce looked too much like blood, and the pasta stuck in Jake's throat like glue. They ate in silence, the TV's chatter the only thing keeping the room from suffocating them. After dinner, Jake went through the house like a man possessed, checking every lock twice, wedging a chair under the back door for good measure. Sophie trailed behind him, clutching her phone like a lifeline. "Can you stay in my room tonight?" she asked, her voice small. "Just until I fall asleep?" Jake's chest tightened. He hated seeing her like this, his tough little sister reduced to a scared kid. "Yeah, sure," he said, ruffling her hair. "But if you snore, I'm out." She managed a weak smile, and they camped out in her room, Jake sprawled on the floor with a spare blanket. He stayed until her breathing evened out, then slipped back to his own bed, his mind racing. What had she seen? Was it just her imagination, or was someone out there watching them? Sleep didn't come easy. Jake tossed and turned, the house's noises louder now, like it was mocking him. At 3 a.m., a sound jolted him upright, a pounding at the front door, hard and desperate, like someone was trying to break it down. His blood turned to ice. The knocks came in waves, each one heavier than the last, rattling the frame. Jake froze, his breath shallow, every muscle screaming at him to move but his body refusing. The knocking stopped as suddenly as it started, leaving a silence so thick it choked him. He waited, straining to hear footsteps, voices, anything, but there was nothing. Just the faint hum of the fridge downstairs, oblivious to the terror clawing at his chest. He didn't sleep after that. Neither did Sophie, who crept into his room an hour later, her face ghost white. "You heard it too, didn't you?" she whispered. "Yeah," he admitted, his voice hoarse. "I don't know what it was, maybe some drunk guy got the wrong house." She didn't buy it, and neither did he. They sat there, huddled under his comforter, jumping at every creak until dawn broke, painting the sky a sickly gray. Morning brought no answers, only exhaustion. Jake's eyes burned as he dragged himself downstairs, Sophie trailing behind like a shadow. They needed normalcy, something to ground them, so he grabbed a trash bag from the kitchen and headed outside to the garbage bins. The air was crisp, the kind of fall morning that usually felt refreshing, but today it just made his skin crawl. He was halfway to the bins when he saw it. A shape in the grass near the vegetable garden, sprawled face down like a discarded doll. His stomach plummeted. "Sophie, stay back!" he shouted, his voice cracking. She froze on the porch, her hands flying to her mouth. Jake inched closer, his pulse hammering in his ears. The figure was a man, mid-30s maybe, his flannel shirt soaked with blood, dark and sticky, pooling in the dirt. His face was turned away, one arm twisted at an unnatural angle. Jake's knees buckled. Hey, you okay?" he called, his voice barely a squeak. No response, no movement. The man wasn't breathing. "Oh, God," Jake muttered, fumbling for his phone. His hands shook so bad he nearly dropped it, but he managed to dial 911. There's a body in my yard," he stammered when the operator picked up. He's dead, I think. There's blood everywhere." The next hour was a blur. Cop cars swarmed the street, their lights flashing like a nightmare in broad daylight. Officer Daniels, a grizzled guy with a mustache, took charge, cordoning off the yard while two other cops examined the body. Sophie clung to Jake's arm, her nails digging into his skin as they answered question after question. "Did you hear anything unusual last night?" Daniels asked, his pen hovering over a notepad. Jake swallowed hard. "Yeah. Someone was banging on the door at like 3 a.m. It stopped after a minute. And Sophie saw someone last night outside the kitchen window. She said he was covered in blood." Daniel's eyes narrowed, but he didn't push. They recounted everything, the scream, the window, the knocking, each word feeling like a confession they didn't understand. The cops searched the property, but there were no footprints, no weapons, nothing to explain how the man ended up there. "He wasn't shot," Daniel said later, his voice low. "No stab wounds either, far as we can tell. Could be internal injuries, but we won't know until the coroner's report." Jake's head spun. "Who is he? Do you know?" Daniel shook his head. "No ID on him. Doesn't match any recent missing persons. We'll run his prints, see what comes up." They took the body away in a black bag, the zipper's rasp echoing in Jake's skull. Sophie didn't cry. She just stared, her face blank, like her brain had shut down to protect her. Jake wanted to hug her, to tell her it was okay, but the words stuck in his throat. It wasn't okay. Nothing about this was okay. Mark and Ellen got home that afternoon, their faces ashen when they heard the news. They grilled Jake and Sophie for details, their voices sharp with worry, but there was nothing new to say. The police called later, saying they'd found no leads, no name, no motive, no explanation for why a blood-soaked stranger had died in their yard. That night, Jake couldn't sleep. He sat by his window, staring at the backyard, the garden now a crime scene in his mind. Sophie's story gnawed at him, the man she'd seen bloody and watching. Was it the same guy? Had he been out there all night bleeding out while they cowered inside? The thought made Jake's stomach twist, a mix of guilt and dread he couldn't shake. Sophie started sleeping with the lights on, her door cracked open so she could hear Jake down the hall. He didn't tease her about it, he got it. Every time he passed the kitchen window, he half expected to see that figure again, eyes locked on him through the glass, blood dripping down his chest like a warning. Weeks passed, then months, but the questions never stopped. Why their house? Why them? The police closed the case, calling it an unexplained death. But Jake knew better. Something had happened that night, something they'd never understand. It clung to him like damp rot, seeping into every quiet moment, every glance at the backyard. Sometimes late at night, he'd hear Sophie whisper, "Do you think he's still out there?" Jake never answered. He didn't have to. They both felt it. A shadow that lingered, watching, waiting. Its story buried with the stranger in their yard. Lila Hayes gripped the steering wheel of her beat-up Dodge Ram, the Missouri sun baking the cracked dashboard. At 38, she'd logged more miles behind the wheel than most people would in a lifetime. A habit she'd picked up from her dad, who'd spent decades hauling freight across the Midwest. Today's drive wasn't for work, though. It was for escape. She'd packed her kids, Emma and Noah, into the truck for a weekend at the old family farmhouse near Willow Falls, a 3-hour trek from their cramped Springfield apartment. Her husband, Tom, was stuck at Fort Leonard Wood, his leave request shot down at the last minute. Typical Army nonsense. So it was just Lila and the kids barreling down a 2-lane highway, chasing a sliver of peace. Emma, 10 and all elbows, sat shotgun, her ponytail bouncing as she rifled through a backpack stuffed with snacks and sketchbooks. Noah, 6 and small for his age, was in the back, his nose buried in a dog-eared comic book, his sneakers kicking the seat rhythmically. Lila glanced at them in the rearview mirror, her heart doing that familiar tug. They were her world. Emma with her fierce curiosity, Noah with his quiet fears. But God, raising them alone half the time was like juggling knives. "Mom, can we play music?" Emma asked, popping a gummy worm into her mouth. "Something that doesn't suck." "Language, Em," Lila said, but she smirked. "Pick something, just no screamo crap, all right? I'm not in the mood for a headache." Emma grinned and synced her phone to the truck's ancient Bluetooth, blasting a pop playlist that made Noah groan dramatically. Lila didn't mind. The noise filled the cab, drowning out the hum of her own thoughts, memories of long hauls, bad fights with Tom, and the gnawing worry that she wasn't doing this mom thing right. It was June 15th, 2025. And the weather was perfect, low 80s, a breeze ruffling the soybean fields that stretched endlessly on either side. The road was quiet, just the occasional semi or pickup passing by. Lila's shoulders relaxed as she settled into the drive. There was something meditative about these back roads, the way they curved gently through hills, the world slowing down to match her breath. They were about an hour in when she noticed it. A maroon sedan, rusty around the edges, trailing a few car lengths behind. Nothing unusual at first. Just another driver headed somewhere same as her. But after 10 minutes it hadn't budged. No attempt to pass even on the dotted line stretches where it could have zipped by easy. Lila's eyes flicked to the rear view, her gut tightening. She'd driven enough to know when something felt off, and this did. "Everything okay, Mom?" Emma asked, catching Lila's glance. "Yeah, kiddo," Lila lied, forcing a smile. "Just checking my mirrors, gotta stay sharp." Noah piped up from the back, his voice small. "Is someone following us?" Lila's heart skipped. She hated how perceptive he was, how he could sniff out her worry like a bloodhound. "Nah, buddy," she said, keeping her tone light. "Just some slowpoke back there. Probably lost in a podcast or something." He nodded, but his kicking stopped, and Lila could feel his eyes on her. She sped up a tick, watching the speedometer nudge past 60. The sedan matched her, its grille glinting in the sunlight. She slowed to 50. It slowed too. Her palms grew slick against the wheel. Coincidence, she told herself. People zone out on long drives. Happens all the time. But the knot in her stomach wouldn't loosen. Lila's dad had taught her to trust her instincts back when she was barely taller than a tire. "Road's got eyes," he'd say. "You feel 'em watching, you don't ignore it." She couldn't shake the feeling now. Those eyes were on her, steady and unblinking. She decided to test it. Up ahead was a turnoff, a narrow county road she'd never taken, lined with cornfields and not much else. "Hold on, guys," she said, signaling right. "Taking a scenic route." "Why?" Emma asked, her pencil pausing over her sketchbook. "'Cause I feel like it," Lila snapped, sharper than she meant. Emma raised an eyebrow but didn't push. The truck rumbled onto the smaller road, gravel crunching under the tires. Lila's eyes locked on the rear view. For a moment, the sedan kept going straight and relief flooded her chest. False alarm. Just her nerves getting the better of... Then it turned. Slow, deliberate, like it didn't want to lose her. The sedan's tires kicked up dust as it followed, settling back into its eerie rhythm. Lila's breath caught. "Shit," she muttered under her breath, then glanced at the kids. Noah was staring out the window, his comic forgotten. Emma's pencil was still, her eyes darting between Lila and the mirror. "Mom." Emma's voice was quiet, laced with something Lila hadn't heard before. Fear. "It's fine," Lila said, but her voice cracked. She gripped the wheel tighter, her knuckles whitening. The sedan was closer now, close enough that she could make out the driver. A man, maybe mid-40s, a baseball cap pulled low over his face. She couldn't see his eyes, but the way his head tilted like he was studying her sent a chill down her spine. She sped up again, the truck's engine growling as she pushed it to 70. The sedan kept pace, its bumper gleaming like a predator's teeth. Lila's mind raced. No cell service out here. She'd checked earlier, cursing the dead zones that plagued these roads. No way to call Tom or the cops. Just her, the kids, and this stranger who wouldn't let go. "Mom, why's he so close?" Noah whimpered, his voice trembling. Lila's chest ached. She wanted to pull over, wrap him in her arms, tell him it was nothing. But she couldn't lie, not when her own pulse was hammering like a war drum. "He's just being annoying," she said, forcing calm she didn't feel. Some drivers are like that. We're okay. Emma wasn't buying it. Should we stop? Like at a gas station or something? Lila nodded, seizing the idea like a lifeline. Good call, Em. There's a store up ahead. We'll pull in, stretch our legs. She didn't say the rest. See if he follows. She didn't have to. Emma's jaw was set, her eyes sharp like she was piecing it together too. The convenience store appeared like a mirage, its faded sign promising cold drinks and bait. Lila signaled early, her hands steady despite the adrenaline pumping through her veins. The parking lot was gravel, nearly empty except for a rusted minivan near the pumps. She eased the truck to a stop, her eyes glued to the rear view. The sedan didn't slow. It cruised past, its engine a low hum, disappearing down the highway. Lila exhaled, her shoulders slumping. See? She said, more to herself than the kids. Just some guy going somewhere, we're good. But her hands were still shaking as she killed the engine. Come on, she said, unbuckling. Let's grab some snacks, my treat. Inside, the store smelled like stale coffee and motor oil. Emma beelined for the candy aisle, Noah trailing her like a shadow. Lila lingered by the counter, chatting with the clerk, a wiry woman with a smoker's rasp, about the weather, the crops, anything to ground herself. The woman didn't mention any weird drivers, and Lila didn't ask. She didn't want to sound paranoid, not when her kids were watching her every move. They piled back into the truck with a bag of chips and sodas, the mood lighter. Emma cranked the music again, and Noah even smiled when Lila tossed him a candy bar. She pulled onto the highway, scanning the road ahead and behind. Nothing. Just open fields and a sky turning gold with the late afternoon sun. Maybe she'd overreacted. Maybe it was just a guy with no sense of road etiquette. She wanted to believe it, so she did. For a while. 20 minutes later, it was back. Not close this time, but far enough that she couldn't be sure at first. A speck in the rear view, growing steadier with each mile. Lila's stomach twisted. The headlights, the shape of the hood, it was the same damn sedan. She squinted, the sun glaring off her mirror, but there was no mistaking it. Her heart kicked into overdrive. Mom? Emma's voice was sharp now, her sketchbook forgotten. Is that him again? Lila didn't answer right away. She couldn't. Her throat felt like it was closing up, her mind screaming at her to do something, anything. She pressed the gas, the truck lurching forward. The sedan stayed put, a constant shadow in the distance. She slowed, testing again. It slowed too, mocking her. Noah, sweetie, put your comic down, she said, her voice tight. Both of you just stay calm, okay? Is he gonna hurt us? Noah asked, his eyes wide, his comic slipping to the floor. No, Lila said fiercely, more to convince herself than him. Nobody's hurting anybody, I won't let them. Emma leaned forward, her voice low. What do we do, Mom? We can't just keep driving. Lila's mind raced. The farmhouse was still an hour away and the next town was too far to risk it. But there was a rest area up ahead. She'd stopped there before, years ago. It wasn't much, just a squat building with vending machines and a picnic table. But it was better than being out here exposed. We're gonna stop at the rest area, she said, her tone firm. Get some air, figure this out. If he follows, we'll deal with it. Emma nodded, but Noah curled into himself, his knees pulled to his chest. Lila wanted to scream, to ram the truck into that sedan and demand answers, but she couldn't. not with her kids in the car, their safety riding on every choice she made. The rest area was desolate, just a lone semi parked at the far end, its driver nowhere in sight. Leela pulled in close to the building, the truck's tires crunching gravel loud enough to make her wince. She scanned the highway, holding her breath. No sedan, no headlights, just the hum of cicadas and the fading light. "Okay," she said, exhaling. "Let's stretch our legs. Stay close." They climbed out, the air warm and heavy with the scent of cut grass. Lila's eyes never stopped moving, sweeping the lot, the road, the tree line beyond. Emma grabbed Noah's hand, pulling him toward the vending machines. Lila followed, her keys clutched like a weapon, her senses dialed to 11. An older woman passed by with a yappy dog, giving them a curt nod. Lila nodded back, her throat dry. Normal. This was normal. Just people going about their day. She bought the kids some chips, her hands fumbling with the coins. They sat at a picnic table, Noah picking at his snack, Emma watching the road like a hawk. "You think he's gone?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Leela forced a smile. "Yeah, probably just some weirdo with too much time on his hands." But she didn't believe it. Not really. Her gut was still screaming, that old road instinct telling her the danger wasn't gone. It was waiting. She kept her eyes on the highway, half expecting the sedan to roll into view, its driver smirking like he'd won some twisted game. They loaded back into the truck, the kids quieter now, the earlier lightness gone. Lila merged onto the highway, her mirrors her lifeline. No sedan, just a few random cars, a semi lumbering in the distance. She let herself breathe, let the road's rhythm pull her back. The farmhouse wasn't far now. They'd get there, lock the doors, and forget this ever happened. The sun was dipping low, painting the fields in shades of amber and red. Emma hummed softly. Noah dozed off, his comic crumpled in his lap. Lila's grip on the wheel loosened, her heart slowing to a steadier beat. Maybe it was over. Maybe. Then she saw it, a glint in the rear view, far back but unmistakable. The sedan. It was there again, a ghost that wouldn't quit. Lila's blood ran cold. She didn't speed up this time, didn't slow down. She just drove, her eyes flicking between the road and the mirror, her mind a storm of fear and fury. "Mom?" Emma's voice was small, her eyes locked on the mirror too. "I see him," Lila said, her voice steel. "We're almost there, Em. Just hold tight." The farmhouse's dirt road came into view, a ribbon of dust cutting through the fields. Lila signaled, her hands steady now, fueled by a mama bear rage she hadn't felt in years. She turned, the truck bouncing over ruts, the sedan still trailing in the distance. Let him follow, she thought, let him try. She'd protect her kids no matter what. They reached the farmhouse as dusk settled, the old place glowing under the last rays of sun. Lila parked close to the porch, her eyes never leaving the road. The sedan didn't appear. No dust cloud, no headlights. Just silence broken only by the kids' shaky breaths. "We're here," she said, turning to them with a smile she didn't feel. "Safe and sound." Emma nodded, but her eyes were haunted. Noah clung to his comic, his knuckles white. Leela locked the doors that night, checked every window, and kept her phone close, even with no signal. The kids slept in her bed, their bodies warm against hers. But sleep didn't come for Lila. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The sedan's grill burned into her mind. Weeks later, back in Springfield, the fear lingered. Leela checked her mirrors more than she used to, her heart jumping at every maroon car. She never told Tom the full story. Didn't want him worrying from 1,000 miles away. The kids didn't talk about it either, but she saw it in their eyes, the way they stuck closer to her now, like they sensed the world wasn't as safe as they'd thought. Who was he? Why her? The questions gnawed at Lila. Sleepless nights spent replaying every mile of that drive. Maybe he was just a creep toying with her for kicks. Maybe it was something worse. Something she'd never know. All she knew was this. She'd kept her kids safe. And if that sedan ever showed up again, she'd be ready. Clara Monroe couldn't sleep. The clock on her nightstand blinked 9:47 p.m., its red glow mocking her restless mind. At 42, she'd learned to live with the ache in her chest, the one that had settled there 6 years ago when her daughter Ellie slipped away. A sudden fever, a hospital room, and then silence. Ellie was gone at 7, leaving Clara to pick up the pieces of a life that no longer made sense. Tonight the ache was sharper, a knife twisting with every breath. It wasn't Ellie's anniversary, not exactly. October 3rd had passed a week ago. But Clara felt her daughter's absence like a pulse, urging her to do something, anything, to feel close again. She rolled out of bed, her Brooklyn apartment suffocatingly quiet. The hardwood floor was cold under her bare feet as she grabbed her coat and keys. Greenwood Cemetery. That's where she needed to be. It was Ellie's place, her resting spot, a patch of earth where Clara could whisper apologies and promises she'd never keep. Her friend Sarah had warned her about wandering cemeteries after dark. It's not safe, Clara, and it's creepy as hell. But Sarah didn't get it. Nobody did. The stillness of a graveyard at night was the only place Clara felt whole, like Ellie might hear her through the veil. Outside, the October air bit at her cheeks, the streets of Park Slope eerily empty. Clara's boots echoed on the sidewalk as she walked the half-mile to Greenwood, her breath fogging in the chill. The cemetery's iron gates loomed ahead, their spikes glinting under a distant street lamp. At 10:15 p.m., the place was supposed to be locked up tight, but Clara knew better. The side entrance off 25th Street was a crapshoot. Sometimes the staff forgot to chain it, or maybe they figured no one was dumb enough to sneak in. Tonight the gate was ajar, just enough for her to slip through. She hesitated, her hand on the cold metal, a prickle of doubt crawling up her spine. Then Ellie's face flashed in her mind, those wide blue eyes, that gap-toothed grin, and Clara pushed through. Greenwood was a beast of a place, 478 acres of rolling hills and marble angels. Beautiful by day, but something else entirely at night. The moonlight cast long shadows, turning headstones into jagged teeth. Clara's sneakers crunched on the gravel path, the sound unnaturally loud, like she was trespassing on sacred ground. She pulled her coat tighter, her heart thudding with a mix of grief and nerves. She'd been here dozens of times, day and night, and never felt scared. Not really. But tonight the air felt heavy, like the cemetery was holding its breath, watching her every step. Ellie's grave was a 15-minute walk, tucked near a willow tree that drooped like it was mourning too. Clara knew the route by heart, weaving through rows of weathered stones, their inscriptions faded by time. She kept her eyes forward, ignoring the shadows that seemed to shift just beyond her vision. "It's just the wind," she told herself, though the air was still as death. Her phone stayed in her pocket, no flashlight, no distractions. She wanted to feel Ellie, not some glowing screen. When she reached the grave, Clara's knees buckled. The headstone was small, too small for a life so big. Eleanor Grace Monroe, 2012 to 2019. Forever our light. She sank to the grass, the damp soaking through her jeans, and traced the carved letters with trembling fingers. "Hey, baby girl," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I'm sorry I didn't come sooner. It's been hard." Tears stung her eyes, hot and relentless. She talked to Ellie like she was there, spilling her guilt, her love, her longing for one more bedtime story, one more laugh. The cemetery was silent, save for the faint rustle of leaves. Clara's words hung in the air unanswered, but she kept talking, her voice a lifeline to the past. She didn't notice the noises at first, soft skittering sounds like pebbles shifting underfoot. Then a faint shuffle, too rhythmic to be the wind. Her breath caught, her head snapping up. The willow's branches swayed, but there was no breeze. She froze, her pulse hammering in her ears, straining to hear over the thud of her own heart. That's when she saw them. In the distance, maybe 50 yards away, 3 figures stood under the moonlight, their silhouettes stark against the graves. They wore long white gowns, flowing and ghostly like something out of a fever dream. Clara's stomach lurched. Caretakers? No, caretakers didn't wear gowns, didn't move like that, slow and deliberate, heads turning in unison as if scanning the darkness. Her first thought was a vigil, maybe a family honoring their dead, but the hour was wrong, the silence too heavy. These weren't mourners. They were something else. Clara's hands dug into the grass, her body screaming at her to run, but she couldn't move. The figures glided forward, not walking so much as floating, their gowns brushing the ground without sound. No flashlights, no voices, just that eerie, synchronized motion like they were one mind in 3 bodies. Her mind raced, grasping for explanations. Paranormal enthusiasts, a cult, but the way they moved, the way the moonlight made their faces blank and pale, felt wrong, like they didn't belong to this world. She should have called out, asked who they were, but fear clamped her throat shut. Instead, she crouched lower, her breath shallow, praying the headstone hit her. The figures paused, their heads tilting as if listening. Clara's heart pounded so loud she was sure they'd hear it. Then one of them turned, its face catching the light, just a glimpse, but enough to see no eyes, no features, just a smooth, empty void. Her blood turned to ice. She had to move. Now Clara eased to her feet, her sneakers scuffing the gravel. The sound was like a gunshot in the silence. The nearest figure snapped its head toward her, and Clara's stomach dropped. "Run!" her brain screamed. "Run!" She stumbled backward, clutching Ellie's headstone for balance, her eyes locked on the figures. They were moving again, faster now, gliding straight for her. Clara bolted, her boots pounding the path, her breath ragged. The cemetery twisted around her, familiar trails turning alien in the dark. She darted between graves, weaving through stone crosses and mossy urns, the figure's presence a weight on her back. She didn't dare look over her shoulder, but she felt them. Closer, always closer, their silence more terrifying than any scream. A whisper broke the air, low and urgent, like voices overlapping in a language she didn't know. It could have been the wind, the trees, but Clara knew better. It was them. Her legs burned, her lungs screaming as she pushed harder, dodging a low branch that seemed to reach for her. The path curved, leading to a cluster of mausoleums, their marble faces glowing like skulls in the moonlight. She ducked behind one, pressing her back to the cold stone, her chest heaving. Silence. No whispers, no footsteps. Just her own ragged breathing loud enough to betray her. She peeked around the corner, her eyes straining in the dark. Nothing. The path was empty, the figures gone or hiding. Clara's skin crawled. They couldn't have vanished, not that fast. She waited, counting her breaths, her hands trembling as she gripped the mausoleum's edge. 1 minute, 2, still nothing. She had to get out. The main gate was too far, but the side entrance wasn't. She could make it if she moved fast. Clara stepped out, her sneakers soft on the gravel, every nerve screaming at her to stay hidden. The cemetery felt alive now, shadows twitching at the edges of her vision, the air thick with something she couldn't name. She moved quickly, hugging the path's curve, her eyes darting between graves. Then she saw it, the faint glow of the street lamp marking the gate. Relief surged through her, sharp and fleeting. She broke into a run, her boots slipping on loose stones, the gate growing closer with every step. It was still ajar, thank God, its gap wide enough to squeeze through. She didn't slow, didn't think, just threw herself at it, stumbling onto the sidewalk with a gasp. Clara doubled over, hands on her knees, her lungs burning. The street was empty, the city's hum distant and indifferent. She was out, safe. But as she straightened, something caught her eye. A van parked across the street, half hidden in the shadows. Its headlights were off, but someone was inside, a silhouette leaning forward watching her. Her pulse spiked, her body screaming at her to run again. The van's engine rumbled to life, low and guttural, like a beast waking up. Clara froze, her eyes locked on the driver's shape, featureless, just a void behind the glass. The van rolled forward, slow and deliberate, no lights, no signal. It passed her, close enough that she could have touched it, then turned the corner and vanished into the night. Clara's legs gave out. She sank to the curb, her hands shaking so bad she couldn't zip her coat. What the hell was that? Were the figures connected to the van? Had she stumbled into something, a ritual, a crime, something worse? Her mind spiraled, questions piling up like graves. She thought about calling the cops, but what would she say? I saw 3 ghosts and a creepy van. They'd laugh her out of the precinct. She walked home in a daze, her boots scuffing the pavement, her head swiveling at every sound. The apartment felt wrong when she got there. Too small, too empty. She locked the door, checked it twice, then sank onto the couch, Ellie's old stuffed bunny clutched to her chest. Sleep was a lost cause. Every creak of the building, every car passing outside sent her heart racing. She kept seeing those blank faces, that van's silhouette, the way it had watched her like it knew her. By morning, exhaustion won. Clara dozed off, the bunny slipping to the floor, but her dreams were jagged. Ellie's laughter fading into whispers, white gowns chasing her through endless graves. She woke with a start, sunlight streaming through the blinds, her throat raw like she'd been screaming. She didn't go back to Greenwood that week or the next. The cemetery had been her sanctuary, but now it felt tainted, a place where Ellie's memory was overshadowed by fear. She visited during the day instead, sticking to crowded hours, her eyes scanning for anything out of place. No gowns, no vans, just mourners and joggers, the world moving on like nothing had happened. But Clara couldn't move on. The questions gnawed at her, waking her at 3 a.m. with a jolt. Who were they? Why were they there, dressed like that, moving like they didn't belong? Was the van part of it, or just some random creep who'd seen her panic? She started writing about it, her freelance gigs forgotten as she filled notebooks with theories, cults, ghosts, hallucinations born of grief. None of it made sense, but writing kept her sane, kept the fear from swallowing her whole. Sometimes she'd drive past Greenwood, her hands tight on the wheel, her eyes searching for that van. She never saw it, but the feeling stayed, a shadow stitched to her skin. Ellie's grave was still there, waiting, but Clara wasn't sure she'd ever feel safe kneeling there again. Not at night, not alone.